with you. Let's see there. Do you see my screen now? Yes. Super. Let's see. Okay. So, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to come and talk about a project that I am leading at the moment and have been chairing for the last few years. It's called Relics of Nature, an Archaeology of Natural Heritage, as the talk here today. And I am this project. It started already in 2021, end of year 2021, and it's recently been granted an extension for various reasons, but it will now end in later this year, in September this year, towards the end of September this year. So we are sort of seeing the end of this journey now, and I'm just going to talk pretty generally about this project, what it's all about, and at the end I'm gonna stop by one of the case studies that we are working on in this project, if I have the time, and then open for questions afterwards. Please let me know if you don't hear me well enough. I don't have a headset. Let me grab my coffee. There we are. I'm very privileged to have a coffee machine in my office. So I'm going to talk about some of the sort of central questions in this project, and these include basically what is natural heritage. Also, how is this idea of natural heritage constructed? How do we come to the idea of what is defined as natural heritage? Also, how is the current situation and the uncertainty caused by climate change possibly affecting ideas about natural heritage and the ways in which it is envisioned? And finally, what does it mean for the potential for natural heritage to become a platform for critical climate action? How do these changes possibly affect that? And just a brief roadmap of my talk today. I'm going to start by giving you sort of a background about the project itself, who we are, where we come from, what we're working on, and so on. And also a little bit about the theoretical context that we're drawing on in the project. Then I'm going to talk about more specifically about natural heritage as a phenomenon, how it's understood, generally speaking, but particularly within the framework of world heritage, which also is connected to many of the case studies that we're working with in the project. And then lastly, I again will touch by one of the case studies that we're working with in the project, ice, glacial heritage, and use that as a prism to dive deeper into how we're working. So to begin with the background, like I said, the project is called Relics of Nature, an Archaeology of Natural Heritage in the High North. And I've sort of downplayed the High North part because as the project has developed, it has also ventured beyond what is defined as the High North, and we actually work with case studies that that go beyond that. So don't pay too much attention to that, even though our initial focus was on the High North. The project is hosted at the University of Oslo, and it's funded by the Norwegian Research Council, and it's also received a small fund or grant from the Arts Council of Norway it's sort of a bilateral grant thing between Iceland and Norway. I can recommend it if you are not familiar with it. Do look into it. you can see here on the screen the group that makes up the project, both the core group and the sort of extended consortium. Together with me in the core group, hosted at the University of Oslo, we have Catherine Burlingame, who is a postdoc on the project, and she's a geographer. We have Sanne Beck Holmgaard and also Alexa Spivak, who both are doing their PhDs, and all of them are present here. And Sanne has a background in social anthropology and Alexa in archaeology and conservation. In the extended consortium, we have Kyrre Kvendok, who is a folklorist and professor at Bergen University. Þorgerður Ólafsdóttir, who is also present, I believe. She is an artist and works independently and is also associated with the Academy of Arts in Iceland. We have Caitlin De Silvi, who is a geographer and professor at Exeter University. Jamie Lorimer, also a geographer and a professor at Oxford University. Emma Waterton. She is, I think she identifies as a heritage scholar. Her background is in archaeology also, but she is a professor at York University. And then finally, we have Kristina Fredengren, who is an archaeologist and is a professor at Stockholm University. And as the title of the project indicates, the project is anchored in archaeology. But as you can tell from this group of people, it is also a very interdisciplinary project. And yeah, together with archaeology, you have, as I said, social anthropology, a lot of geography, conservation, and so on and so forth. And I guess we could say that the project is anchored also in the environmental humanities, more broadly speaking. But the anchoring in archaeology is still very important, I think, not only to me as an archaeologist, but also in terms of the general aim of the project and the questions we ask and the perspectives that guide us in answering these questions. And what I mean by this is that while it is the idea, so to speak, of natural heritage that we're trying to understand, our focus is very much on the materiality of that idea, on the actual material or physical landscapes that represent this idea, and on the concrete ways in which these landscapes or natural phenomena are defined and constructed as natural heritage. So how ideologically speaking, or ideologically and materially speaking, is that construction happening? And this is apparent also in our methodological approach, which is based on combining analyses of natural heritage on paper with studies of natural heritage out there. So we're both doing discourse analysis of policy documents and management reports and other written material and field-based research on landscapes and natural heritage phenomena themselves through archaeological landscape surveys and ethnography and field observations and so on. And what we're not least interested in is the combination of all this, like how these things talk to each other, the landscapes and the ideas that we have. The project team is also international, as you could tell, and we're working with many different landscapes in many different parts of the world. We work in Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Greenland, Svalbard, Wales, England, Alaska, Montana. I don't know if I've covered everything there, but we are sort of spread all over the place. And We also work with many different case studies and different kinds of landscapes, both landscapes that can be understood as sort of pure natures, if you like, but also landscapes that are very much nature cultures or even cultivated. And I have just listed some examples here of cases that we work with. So these include, for example, icy landscapes, which I will come back to, glaciers and glacial landscapes and so on. Also cultivated heritage like orchards and apple farming, which is something that Caitlin De Silvi is working with. We also work with the sort of phenomenon of wilderness and how this is defined and how this also connects to processes of rewilding, which is something that both Jamie Lorimer and also Catherine Burlingame have been working on. Mining landscapes, which is what Alexa is working with. We've also looked into geoheritage and eruptive landscapes and volcanic landscapes, wetlands, which is part of what Sanna is working on, and also the idea of Anthropocene landscapes or proxy landscapes, which can see on the screen the bottom right, I guess, which is this sort of monitoring landscape that is behind the IPCC graphs and numbering and where calculations of climate change are happening and where various installations are scattered throughout the landscapes and also left to become sort of a kind of archaeology of climate change, if you like, which is something that both Sanna and Catherine have been working on. So this is just to give you an idea of the kind of landscapes that we're working on. We've also been, to brag a little bit, we've been extremely productive, and I can only take very limited credit for that. I have an extremely productive team with me on this project, and here's just some examples from the core team. So from myself and Sanna and Kate and Alexa. And you can find these online available. And further here, a couple of articles from the extended consortium, an article on Becoming Apple by Caitlin De Silvi, and also 2 articles by Jamie Lorimer on messy natures and worlding and weirding with beaver. And we've also been involved, or actually the publisher of this book, which Þorgerður Ólafsdóttir collected and edited. It's called Essaya Island Fiction, and the project Relics of Nature is the publisher, basically. And we've also been involved in several different or a few, let's say, different exhibition projects. Here, an example from Þorgerður's exhibition at the National Museum of Iceland, Brotur Framtíð, Future Fragments, and also an exhibition in Cornwall connected to Caitlin De Silvi's Apple Ventures or Apple project. Okay, so working with these different landscapes and case studies, we're not only asking the simple question, what is natural heritage? But more specifically, we ask, what is natural heritage in the Anthropocene today? Or more to the point, how do current challenges like climate change affect understandings of natural heritage? And even how does the fact that the human being is now seen as or understood as a geological force disturb distinctions between natural and cultural heritage? And in this inquiry, we work with three interconnected hypotheses. And these are, firstly, that because climate change is putting nature at risk and causing uncertainty about the future of nature, so to speak, climate change also affects the ways in which nature is understood and managed as heritage. And secondly, because climate change emphasizes the negative aspects of human-nature relations and the vulnerability of nature in that constellation, it also affects the ways in which nature-culture relations are understood. And this includes relations and distinctions between natural and cultural heritage. And then thirdly, that the negative focus on loss and extinction will affect the ways in which natural heritage more generally is understood. Or in other words, that because there is increasing and very legitimate concern for the negative influence human beings have on their natural environment, we might see a reinforcement of an idea of nature and culture as ideally separate spheres, or spheres that should be kept apart. And because there is currently emphasis on the loss and vulnerability of nature, the human-nature relationship may be increasingly portrayed as hierarchical, where human beings are seen as the stewards and the caretakers of a vulnerable natural object, basically. Now, there is, of course, nothing particularly new about this nature-culture divide or the critique thereof. But what is new and also interesting is if this cliche is being reinforced and reinstalled in the context of the Anthropocene. And it's not least this that we want to probe into or sort of problematize in the Relics of Nature project. And we ask, is this reinforcement of the nature-culture divide the kind of thinking that we need at present? Is it actually helpful in a quest for a more sustainable world to think in this way? Also in the context of heritage. And we are, of course, not alone in asking these questions. We join forces with a dense and growing group of scholarship in the environmental humanities and social sciences, where people work on these and related questions. And I've gathered here a couple of thinkers and theories that we are inspired by in our research. And these works come from different directions, and they're not necessarily in complete agreement with each other. But what does unite them and also makes them interesting for us in the Relics project is that they're all concerned with the current state of the world, with climate change and environmental issues, and that they all offer new approaches and understandings of nature and of ecology and sustainability and care in that context. And in terms of natural heritage specifically, these are some of the important lessons that we take with us from these works. Firstly, that we should neither take for granted what nature is or where the boundary goes between nature and culture. Secondly, that nature's main agenda is not to nurture us, human beings, and that nature-culture relationships are more than simply pleasant or predictable or comfortable or reciprocal. That change and loss are processes that are also natural to nature, so to speak. And that caring for nature does not necessarily imply working against change or reducing uncertainty, but also involves learning to live with it. And that also goes then for natural heritage. So to move to the second part and talk a little bit about how nature has been framed as heritage. And again, I'm going to view this mainly or specifically from the perspective of world heritage and UNESCO, because many of the case studies that we're working with are connected to this framework, including the one I will talk about later, but also because UNESCO is a world-leading body, and when it comes to framing heritage generally, and local policy and so on, is drawing often on this global framework. So to begin with, the basics. Within this World Heritage Framework, the general definition of natural heritage is that it refers to natural features, geological and physiographical formations and delineated areas that constitute the habitat of threatened species of animals and plants, and natural sites of value from the point of view of science, conservation, or natural beauty. And UNESCO further describes World Natural Heritage as nature's most precious gifts to humanity, which contains some of the Earth's most valuable natural areas recognized as being of outstanding universal value to humanity for their global significance to nature conservation. Already here, of course, we can recognize a certain emphasis or leaning, and the significant role that specific human values and also human aesthetics play in the definition of natural heritage. This significance is also visible in the selection criteria that UNESCO operates with when sites are selected onto the World Heritage List. And in total, we have, of course, 10 such selection criteria, and 4 of these are associated with natural heritage specifically. And in order to be included, sites need to be of outstanding universal value and meet at least one of these 4 criteria. And these this means that they need to contain superlative natural phenomena or areas of exceptional natural beauty and aesthetic importance, that they need to be outstanding examples representing major stages of Earth history, including the record of life, significant ongoing geological processes in the development of landforms, and so on. To be outstanding examples representing significant ongoing ecological or biological processes in the evolution and development of terrestrial, freshwater, coastal, and marine ecosystems and communities. Or lastly, to contain the most important and significant natural habitats for in situ conservation of biological diversity, including those containing threatened species of outstanding universal value from the point of view of science or conservation. In all these criteria, in general, these criteria underline the significance of representativity in the selection of natural heritage sites. UNESCO emphasizes that the aim of the World Heritage List is to protect a most valuable sample of the world's natural environment, as they say. But it's also clear from these criteria that this is far from a coincidental or an ad hoc sampling of natural phenomena. It's very clearly very selective. And what appears to be central to this selection, on the one hand, there are many things, but to boil them down, you could say that you have on the one hand modern human aesthetics, and on the other hand Western scientific values that are central and sort of running through all these criteria. So even though the stated aim is representativity, the depiction of nature produced through this kind of sampling is therefore presumably also quite selective. It tells a rather specific and exclusive story about what nature is, what it looks like, and how it is of significance. And if we look further into UNESCO's explanation of the value of natural heritage, the same standards and selective storytelling continues to shine through. And here it is stated, and I continue to, to quote them, natural world heritage sites provide crucial habitats to many iconic species and harbor unique natural beauty, stunning landscapes, rare ecological processes, and exceptional biodiversity. These sites also represent a safe haven for some of the most threatened species on Earth. They are estimated to protect over 20,000 globally threatened species, including some of the last individuals of many iconic species. And for some species on the brink of extinction, World Heritage sites have become the last line of defense. Last but not least, millions of people, of course, are directly dependent on the countless benefits and services that these sites can provide, supporting livelihoods and well-being. Over 90% of listed natural sites create jobs and provide income from tourism, and about half help to prevent hazards, it is claimed, such as floods and landslides. And they also have a central role in climate regulation. So this is a long list and a lot of big words. Natural heritage, as we are explained here, is through and through an ideally good thing. It is beautiful, special, it's pure. It is basically nature that we want and nature that we prefer. And a nature that is beneficial to us and which contributes to our well-being on many different levels. Of course, delineations or depictions like these of nature and natural heritage are not particular to UNESCO, but have been and are still dominating views in our world and in academia. If you study the scholarship of heritage studies, as we have done in this project, you will find a similar tendency. For example, when we talk about important and meaningful relations between humans and nature, these relationships are very often explained through culturally and not least positively loaded concepts like kinship and communion and reciprocity. These are the kind of concepts that we bring forth when we're trying to explain the significance of these relationships. And other concepts that we can name are, for example, nurturing, well-being, continuity, health, resilience, and sustainability. Concepts that we do not see, however, are, for example, threatening, weak, ugly, unreliable, unhealthy, dark, greedy, or indifferent. All of which could actually be argued to be descriptive of some natural environments in the high north, where many of us are working. So also from this, it may appear that concerns for nature and natural heritage involve making nature part of our comfort zone through a delegation of values that we see as culturally significant, but also and not least desirable, comfortable. But there is, of course, more to nature than this. And to return to the objectives of the Relics of Nature project, what we ask is this the kind of is this kind of exclusively desirable understanding of natural heritage what we need at present, basically? Is it a selective storytelling based on these kinds of concepts that the Anthropocene is calling for, or can natural heritage at present be something else? And so let me see. Okay, I'm doing fine with time. I can, yeah, okay. I'm gonna finally stop by one of the case studies that we are working with in the project, which is icy heritage landscapes. And this is a topic that actually has taken up more and more space, I would say, in the project as it has evolved. And it's also a topic that has connected many of the case studies that the different members have been working with in Iceland, in Laponia, in northern Sweden, in Finnmark, or northern Norway, in Svalbard, and on Greenland. So it sort of brought the different cases together. These are all quite different landscapes, geographically, of course, and geologically, but they all comprise of different forms of icy heritage, which makes it interesting to draw the links between them. And we are currently working on two articles on this. Sanne Beck Holmgaard, Catherine Burlingame, and myself. One article sort of specifically oriented towards the UNESCO part of this and how UNESCO is dealing with its wealth of icy heritage, and the other one more theoretical and thinking about the phenomenon of ice and how ice can be a prism to think about heritage more generally. Some of the central questions that we are asking include simply how is ice embraced as heritage and how is it managed, basically? What challenges does this involve, not least when it comes to climate change and loss of ice? How is this affecting icy heritage landscapes? And then thirdly, how does thinking with ice challenge traditional heritage understandings and possibly offer alternative ones? And while I would argue that ice as heritage has received, in many ways, has received remarkably little attention, also considering how much ice there is on the heritage list, for example, it is definitely picking up at the moment, and maybe to no surprise. And we are, in a way, riding that wave and trying to catch that momentum in our work as well. And this increasing interest manifests in various ways. On the screen, you have a few examples represented by, firstly, UNESCO and IUCN's report on World Heritage Glaciers from 2022, and two recent academic publications introducing maybe a new field of the humanities. On the one hand, ice humanities, and on the other hand, cold humanities. And then a more public-oriented publication, still written by a very renowned historian, Sverker Sörlin, and it's basically called Snow, a History. So it's a culture history of snow, basically, and winter. Also, another sort of example of this, how ice is is gaining momentum. In 2022, the UN General Assembly declared last year, 2025, as the International Year of Glaciers Preservation. And the period 2025 to 2034 was also declared as the Decade of Action for Cryosphere Science on world basis. So there is much happening on this front. And again, it's not really surprising, of course, that the world's attention is being drawn towards the cryosphere and to glaciers and icy landscapes more generally. In the UNESCO report that I referred to earlier, the UNESCO and IUCN report, they state that studies performed with satellite data highlight that these glaciers, and these glaciers being heritage glaciers, have been retreating at an accelerating rate since 2000. World Heritage glaciers lose on average some 58 billion tons of ice every year, equivalent to the total annual volume of water consumed in France and Spain together, and contribute to almost 5% of global observed sea level rise. Projections indicate that glaciers in 1/3 of World Heritage glaciarized sites will disappear by 2050, regardless of the applied climate scenario. And glaciers in around half of all sites could almost entirely disappear by 2100 in a business as usual emission scenario. So obviously, there is reason for concern. Also, just to mention that we see this momentum picking up also in our discipline, in archaeology, where retreating glaciers and melting snow patches are resulting in a new branch of archaeology, glacial or snowpatch archaeology, as it's called, represented, for example, here by Secrets of the Ice project here in Norway, where archaeologists are, because of ice melt, making some of the most amazing finds we've ever seen, with more or less intact prehistoric artifacts, with preserved details of organic materials and so on. And you can visit, I'm sure some of you are familiar with this project, but you can visit their website for more information. So ice, snow, glaciers are very much on the world's radar because of global warming. In the field of conservation, we often talk about ambassador species. And I have included here 2 articles that one of them by Jamie Lorimer, who is part of our project, who are looking into this specifically, the phenomenon of ambassador species. And ambassador species, they are charismatic animals, basically, that have certain aesthetic value or an appeal to people, and not least to funding bodies and funders that are likely to support conservation projects. So ambassador species are not least good for marketing purposes. And if you Google climate change or global warming, the most common ambassador species that will pop up, I think, is the polar bear. But just as often, maybe, and often as the backdrop of the polar bear, we see ice. Ice in various forms, most often maybe in the form of sea ice and icebergs like you see here, but also you have coastal glaciers calving into the ocean with associated drama effects, or dripping ice caves and tunnels and so on. So ice, just as much as polar bears, has become an ambassador or an emblem, we could say, for climate change globally. And the IUCN report I mentioned earlier refers to glaciers and ice more or less as such, as sentinels of climate change. So as glacial bodies and ice cores also serve as scientific archives for climates and deep pasts and proxies for those of the future, we could say that ice is both the symbol and the measure of the climate crises, represented in melting, retreat, and loss. And we see this all over the world in global media, Whether familiar with ice or not, its ongoing and expected loss has become a matter of global concern and care all over the world. The death of icy bodies is regularly announced in global media, and glacial grief, memorial ceremonies and funerals repeatedly make headline stories all over the world. Recent examples of such glacial casualties include the now renowned Ok Glacier in Iceland, of course, the Pizzol and the Basodino glaciers in the Swiss Alps, Clark Glacier in Oregon, US, and Ayaloco Glacier in Mexico. And thanks to the viral broadcasting of their loss, their former locations are turned into new forms of heritage destinations, places of commemoration, or lieux de mémoire, where something past and lost is remembered and grieved. And this is the case, of course, for Okjökull again, which in August 2019, as most of you are familiar with, reached world media for being the first Icelandic glacier to lose its status and is now commemorated as such by this memorial that you see on the screen on the edge of the caldera that the glacier once covered. And the plaque is inscribed with a letter to the future reading, Ok is the first Icelandic glacier to lose its status as a glacier. In the next 200 years, all our glaciers are expected to follow the same path. This monument is to acknowledge that we know what is happening and what needs to be done, and only you will know if we did it. A slightly different ceremony found place in Reykjavik just over a year ago, when a common memorial or funeral was organized for a total of 15 glaciers worldwide, either lost or soon to be lost. It was a so-called glacier graveyard that was composed of headstones carved in ice, installed on the outskirts of the city, where artists and scholars honored the named bodies of ice through eulogies and song. And the melting installation was introduced as a ritual space to draw attention to the world's disappearing glaciers. Though less dramatic, we also see such memorials at established heritage sites in form of markers or maps showing the moving rim of the glacier in recent times, and here represented by the World Heritage of Vatnajökull National Park. And we also have several digital memory platforms sort of for this same reason, and some of them supported by international heritage bodies such as UNESCO, like the two that you see on the screen here, the Global Glacier Casualty List and the Ice Memory Foundation, where the aim is to document and commemorate for the future the loss of ice and icy bodies. The official and unofficial heritagization of glaciers is nothing new. However, glacial and icy landscapes have for a long time had a draw on explorers and tourists. Glaciers feature in folklores and myths all over the world, and they are even themselves considered ancestral, sacred or divine bodies. And locally, glaciers have a strong cultural significance all over the world, and approximately 18,600 glaciers are today designated World Heritage as part of 50 UNESCO listed heritage sites and landscapes all over the world. So valuing ice and glaciers as heritage is something of an old pan-cultural tradition, we could say. These white landscapes of ice have a draw on human beings that seems to cross-cut cultural, geographical, and temporal boundaries. But what is new, however, is the way in which global climate change is affecting human and cultural engagement with these landscapes, and how the experience and anticipation of glacial loss or glacial retreat and melting is currently fueling a global rediscovery of ice through a very specific lens. And in the Relics project, we want to challenge this perspective. Not because it's not legit, but because, as we've argued, because a heritagization channeled mainly through dominating discourses of loss risks resulting in a much too narrow depiction of what icy heritage is. It's an extremely complicated phenomenon. And also that framing icy heritage through a lens of loss makes it difficult to activate these landscapes as venues for affirmative climate change action and mitigation. So we suggest one might take a step back and simply ask the basic questions. What is ice as heritage? What forms can it take, and how does it behave? And what does it mean to embrace icy and glacial landscapes as heritage? Or how does one care for these difficult phenomena? And these may appear as banal questions in the face of the urgent global climate crisis, but we argue that it is of vital importance that we allow us the hesitation needed to ask and reflect on them, simply in order to understand what we're dealing with. And in reflecting on these questions, we further argue that thinking with ice in all its complexity may be a beneficial exercise for critical heritage thinking in the Anthropocene more generally. Because ice is a very complicated phenomenon. It's not one thing, but many. And I think I will just stop there because I see that my time is, it's running away from me. I can just scroll through while you open the floor for questions. I'll just scroll through these. There were just a couple of slides left. So just to boil down, I think what the interesting thing that is happening is that while ice has for a long time been recognized as a memory object, it's something that we use to get access to the past because it holds on to particles that are from the past. The interesting thing that is happening now is that ice itself is becoming the object of memory. We are commemorating ice as such, and we haven't seen that before, I would argue.